Happy holidays, everybody. This is Dr. Barre Lando, and I'm with a very special guest and an old friend today, Eric Baumgartner, who is a very accomplished practitioner from Ojai, California, acupuncturist, man of many skills. And we're going to talk a little doctor shop here today. And Eric is going to explain some of the really effective techniques that he uses. But good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah, thank you for having me. What a fantastic backdrop for a great conversation.
Exactly. We're at the Lando Beach House, south of where we are from our farm up north. We're escaping the rain, being down here with our
thawing out a little bit.
yeah. Welcome. So we feel like we're in a tropical environment here compared to the monsoons that are happening at home right now.
Oh my gosh.
So we go back a ways now.
Yeah.
And when we first connected, I actually, I had a little practice in Santa Barbara when I came back to the mainland from the islands. And then I had my first little farm up north. And you had an amazing center that you were running in Santa Barbara.
That's
and
right.
I believe I was doing some speaking engagements.
You were, you were a star guest. It was that was a beautiful place. It was that place kind of lives on in the realm of legends now, I think, in Santa Barbara. And I think, unfortunately, for Santa Barbara's sake, it was a little ahead of its time.
Oh, it was epic.
It was a beautiful space, and I remember those talks. We had an amazing kind of series of practitioners come in, and I had met your son Blaine through the products that you had created, and he came in. I was always, I was in charge of like filtering out which products we want to carry, and he came in with these products, and I'm, I saw this young guy, and I'm kind of like,
you're talking about me, right?
I was talking about you, a young version of you.
Yeah.
And he's like got these products, and he's pretty slick and really, really friendly. And I'm, of course, like very skeptical about products. I'm sure as you are, you've looked at like hundreds and thousands of products over the course of years. And I flip these things over and I'm like, wait a minute, somebody knew what they were doing when they put these together. It's not just like a kitchen sink formula. It's actually, I fell in love with plants first when it came to medicine.
Yeah.
So I love looking at herbal formulations. And when I saw your formulas, I was like, okay, I'm paying attention to this. And that eventually led to bringing you in to talk and hear about what you actually do, because I was, immediately curious.
If I recall, I was doing a series on German New Medicine.
That's right.
And that stretched some imagination because it creates the nexus. It's a very science-based system, but it creates that nexus between the psyche, which then stimulates brain centers specific to body parts through neurology and embryology, so that those areas of biology can biologically express a trauma that's been imposed on the psyche.
Right.
And understood in that way, it was really relieving the pressure for enabling a spiritual evolution, so that there's no impediments on that emotional psyche level.
Amazing.
And I remember after one lecture, there's one gentleman that took a bit of umbrage of what I was talking about, because he felt that I was, let's just say, leveling a bit of blame on people for their afflictions rather than acknowledging that these people had a real disease.
Right.
In which I responded that, well, no, actually, what we're doing is empowering to educate that we are not victims of disease, but we are actually in the driver's seat if we understand where things emanate from those deeper levels in the first place. So
yeah,
that is a good segue into what you do.
I love that. I love that. And it's that bridge, right? The kind of, my practice, what I see so often is like the primacy of the psychological factors in the disease process. And I remember that model was new to me, but it fit really well with kind of the way I was trained in medicine and the Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, Taoist medicine. There's this emphasis and there's this kind of sophisticated way of looking at the connection between psychology and physiology, right? You can't separate the two. You can't really pretend that they're two different things. You can't sort of put one on the sideline and say, no, we're just going to focus over here. And then maybe later we'll think about that. And so it really resonated with me. And I didn't have that piece specifically related to cancer that model really highlighted in the way that the way that emotional traumatic types of experiences actually create a physiological, neurological response, and that then that has to be processed, right? That it's, in a way, like the Taoists would say, that event, in a way, right or wrong, is part of your curriculum. And that then, like, it holds, in a way, the key to your transcending, transforming, right? And ultimately evolving towards the highest version of who you can become, or what they would call your destiny.
Yeah.
So that just all clicked. And I remember always I don't know if this was just for me, because it was something I heard and it kind of like clicked for me too. You talked about the nous atom. Remember talking about that? Or I don't know how it came in.
The seed atom?
The seed atom.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't know how you would describe that, but in my memory, it's like this, there's like the way I language it now is like, it's this spark of the divine that is like the seed of our consciousness, and if you could give a physical form to the spiritual nucleus of who we are, it would be that.
Yeah. I like to, I'm pretty basic. I like to just reduce things to their simplicity and obvious. So we take an acorn, and of course our brilliant botanists in the conventional sense are always trying to figure out, well, how does a mighty oak grow from an acorn? Well, it's not in the acorn. The acorn is a portal. It's an akashic that is the portal into the informational fields existing elsewhere in what we would think of as the non-physical, if you want to separate the parts. And through that portal, those information fields are activated, when the acorn is put in proper soil, is watered and so forth. And I tended to a lot of pregnant women in my practice years, and I would explain to them what prenatal really was, because I tried to prep them as far as what this incoming soul was really experiencing before entering the simulation. And prenatal, if we want to bring the Tao in, since you brought it up, is that time when there was no separation, there was no yin and yang, there was no polarity, there was no mind versus heart. Everything was in a state of being, so that there was no conflict. And of course, when we enter the appearance world, which is predicated on an electrical event from consciousness, which creates a polarity, which creates a resonance, but also a separation, our entire journey is about those two polarities reconciling and coming into back full circle into a harmonious whole. So prenatal care to me wasn't just taking enough vitamin K or whatever. It was about, let's get our consciousness right so this incoming soul has fertile ground to fulfill their real purpose in life, which is to become self-realized.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And that's so resonant with a lot of how I treat in my practice, because I feel like that, you know, atom, that's, you know, spirit atom, that kind of core seed, right? I always use that metaphor too. And when I was doing, you know, when I was practicing at Alchemy, it was called Alchemy Arts Center, where you came,
yeah.
right? It was, again,
I forgot. Yeah, that
kind
was
of ahead of its time, and also
way ahead
harkening
of its
back
time.
to the, you know, the great masters that made it possible for us to be here having this conversation. We would do these kind of group, it's like a style of group acupuncture that I developed in my practice after doing community acupuncture for a few years, where I noticed people would come in these waves. So, you know, the community acupuncture model is basically like you have someone come in every 15 minutes into a community area, give them a quick tongue and pulse diagnosis.
Yeah.
You kind of give them needles. There's no frills. It's not a spa experience. You just lay there with your needles in an armchair and get super relaxed. You can stay as long as you want. What I noticed was people would come in waves. And when you're looking at someone through the lens of, you know, Taoist medicine or acupuncture, you know, you're looking for patterns. And so I've noticed that although people had different symptoms, complaints, that they all needed the same treatment, or all the same, like, vessel at least.
Interesting.
Right? And I was most often treating through the lens of the 8 extraordinary vessels, which are those primordial prenatal vessels.
Which there's a lot of different opinions on what those really are, but they run, well, literally deep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the Taoists would say, and going all the way back to that central vessel, or the Chongmai, is like the seed, right? It holds, kind of like you're saying, okay, it's the seed before yin and yang, before it's sort of separated embryologically, and it's got all of this, it's got access to all the information that's relevant to you as an individualization of spirit, but also all the information that comes through your lineage, right, and your history.
I always like to hear how people chose this vocation. It's a vocation, you know. Unfortunately, health practitioners these days are given different types of training so they can pass standardized tests, and they, you know, a lot of the good training isn't around anymore, but that's another story. So you come from a lineage of doctors. Your father was a rheumatologist, I believe? Yeah,
my father was a rheumatologist. My grandfather was actually a pediatrician. So I had that idea right away. I don't know if I ever really even thought about it. I think I just sort of assumed I was going to be a doctor one day. And I even remember, you know, being young and all my dad's friends were doctors. And so I was just looking at them and which one drove the coolest car. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a plastic surgeon because he drives the coolest car.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately it became a thing of prestige and money, but not so much anymore.
Yeah, I know, right? And so when I got a couple years into my pre-med training, and I was just staring down that narrow tunnel of thinking, wow, these teachers didn't care about whether or not I was learning. They weren't even really trying to teach as much as they were just throwing out the information and kind of trying to weed you out. And, you know, and then I would go to a philosophy class and have this like mind-opening experience. I would go to my language classes and just like feel like how much it was helping me grow as a person. And I would go to my science classes and I was like, they were kind of trying to like squash you, you know, squish the life out of you. And so I always tell people, I remember talking to my dad at that moment and expecting him to kind of like tell me to just tough it out. And he was like, you know, medicine's not what it used to be. It's, you know, most doctors that I know got into it because they really want to help people. And now medicine is, you know, the way you can help people is dictated by insurance companies. Yeah. You know, and it's not even that easy to make a good living anymore. And you have these astronomical malpractice insurance fees because if you mess up, everyone just wants to sue you. And even if you didn't mess up, you know.
Medical doctors, we're different. You know, we had an old family practitioner who delivered me, and I was the third attempt at a girl. It didn't work out. And so,
boys.
so they didn't have a name for me.
Okay.
And he was this old French doctor, friend of the family. His name was Dr. Barre Paul.
Okay.
So that's
how you got to. Well,
I don't know if that has any connection with me doing what I'm doing, but
absolutely.
I was first doctor type of the family.
Okay.
So now you went in a different direction.
So yeah, after that, I was kind of
into international travels.
It's kind of disoriented from there because I didn't really know what. I'd never thought about anything else. Mm-hmm. I did know I wanted to go abroad. My mom actually studied abroad in Rome in the late 60s.
So what, if you don't mind, what's your genetics?
It's complicated. No, it's kind of typical, like mixed European. My mom's family is mostly Irish. My last name is Baumgartner. So German, Hungarian kind of mixture.
So no Italians.
No Italian blood, but my mom always like spoke a little Italian to me and told me she had a drop of Italian. Yeah. So I always kind of thought I did.
I was kind of suspecting that you might, so that's why.
I lived in Italy.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Eventually I got there and lived there, and so speak some Italian, which I everywhere I've lived, I feel like I get a drop of blood from.
Well, okay, so now you eventually ended up in Mexico, which was really instrumental in your first introduction to plant medicine.
That's right. Yep. It was interesting because, growing up in this matrix, like nobody was interested in consciousness or healing or, really spirituality at all. You grow up with going to church, and that's about the extent of it.
And then earlier, now I'm older than you, but you were still caught the tail end of where coming up, there's just a lot of drug usage and everything, which was
that was kind of the only way to connect to something different that we had access to. And I got a really strong-handed reprimand from, I like to think from spirit about recreational use of plant medicines. And so when I landed in Mexico, I was pretty reformed from all that. But I got an introduction to something really different. I ended up meeting some young people who were just more into consciousness and they were starting to dive into their own indigenous traditions, which for me was, not something that accessible, coming from Irish and German backgrounds, and there wasn't this rich, like, accessible history. And so I started traveling around Mexico, going to all these sacred sites. Right in Mexico City, there's several Aztec sites you can visit. It's kind of mind-blowing that we grow up not realizing that, like, right in our backyard, these, like, highly advanced civilizations took place, right? And so that just opened up a whole path for me. I kind of started thinking about myself as a kind of a pilgrim going to all these different places, and met up with these young people who were going out to do pilgrimages to their sacred places. And it really changed my perception of what I was up to and what my life was about. And I had an experience of being out in the desert 30, 40 miles away from any other humans and getting really sick and really having to rely on plant medicine and, something my friend called Reiki. And I was like, what? And it healed me. And I was blown away. And the power of plants in that experience just woke me up to, like, oh, medicine isn't just what I thought. Medicine is something much, much bigger, and that it's connected to nature, which I just intuitively and always connected to. And
medicine should be intuitive, and that, I think, is the role of physician, which was the original term as it was coined back by Hippocrates, I believe, which is to be a teacher.
Love that.
And rather than convoluted theories of transporting across cell membranes and classifications and taxonomies of diseases and tissues, it's intuitive because I always bring it into the alchemical sense, in that real science even in the Western sense, it's supposed to be about observation and observation of the patterns within nature. So a real detective in a medical sense is to observe patterns. And once those patterns are discerned from the natural order, then you can mimic those and understand things that are maybe interrupting those patterns. And realize there's no such thing as an entity called disease. And conveying that to a patient, again, just like we were talking about German New Medicine, taking people out of the victim consciousness, realize that they have a lot more to say about it, and that medicine isn't complicated. In fact, I'm of the firm belief that we don't need medical schools myself, but that's just me. So, okay, so now you're in the outback of Mexico, you're taking plants, you're healing your own body. And now you...
That kind of started me on a plant journey, really. I started following the thread of learning about plants, and I lived abroad for the next few years, and everywhere I went, I bumped into natural medicine, ways that people were using plants to heal. And that kind of bled out into other things, other aspects of natural medicine that I could get my hands on while I was traveling. I traveled for a few years with my only health insurance being a book, like a acupressure A to Z book. And every time I went to it, it worked at least 50% better, sometimes 100% better, with just, pressing on these little points. So by the time I landed back in the US, I was pretty convinced of the reality and the efficacy of that medicine. And I ended up deciding to, kind of go pro in that way. And it kind of hit in two ways for me, because at least at that time, the only way you could be a licensed herbalist was to go to acupuncture school. And I thought, well, bonus is I get to learn acupuncture, which I already know works, and, get a training in an herbal system that is really sophisticated, right? And so you look at plants through a system like what Chinese medicine has developed, you get all the nuance of formulation and how herbs work together, and all the different organ systems and channels and temperatures and qualities of each plant. It's not just like kind of allopathic, which unfortunately I think Western medicine kind of fell into, where it's like, oh, take this herb for cough, take this herb for headache, take this herb for stomach ache, which is great. It's better than a pharmaceutical that has side effects, but it doesn't really teach you about how things are working, right? And so really served a beautiful purpose for me. And then I kind of stumbled, I always think just by grace and by the hand of spirit, into studying with some of my key professors in that time were trained in the Taoist lineage, which, kind of bridges into one of the things I was hoping to share today here, which is like just that, again, the way of looking at our bodies and our physiology through the lens, or including the lens of psychology, right? Or probably the ancients didn't even call it psychology. It was all just embedded in medicine, right? And spirituality. Nowadays we call it psychology, and we've kind of like pushed it over into its own little silo.
And I know an important component of your work is through the breath. The breath in other cultures was rightfully understood as life, but it wasn't just in an oxygenation sense. It was that breath is the connection with spirit. I lived in Hawaii for many years, and outsiders were termed howlies. And that became, unfortunately, understood more as a derogatory against non-Hawaiians. But in the original sense, haole literally translated means without breath. And when the missionaries first came to the islands and tried to domesticate the natives from their authentic ways, the native peoples observed that these outsiders were no connection to spirit.
Mm-hmm.
They were without breath, and they were called howlies.
Easy.
So every indigenous culture that I know really makes a big deal about breath. And of course, it's the physical act of respiration that can be incorporated, as you have to a fine extent with your therapies. Yeah. But if you could tell us a little bit about how you use breath work in your practice.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful synthesis of everything that I learned in all of my different areas of training. I think we both talked about having kind of had some immersion in that shamanic type of training and lineage, and the indigenous medicine traditions of the Americas, and really all peoples around the world have some depth. And even when you go deep enough into acupuncture, you find that at its root, it is a shamanic type of a medicine. And for me, shamanic means a way of making the ordinary sacred, right? Or recognizing that everything has a sacred nature. So a few years after graduating from acupuncture school, I'm out there trying to figure it out. Like we talked about, whatever you get in your training is like, it's like a little.
Yeah, before we're recording, we're both acknowledging that formalized training, it has its value, and it sets your intention and gets you in a sort of a disciplined state. On the other hand, it doesn't teach you how to be a practitioner.
Yeah, it's like it opens the door for the next phase of learning.
And I think what I observed today is people doing paint by the numbers medicine versus medicine as a true art form, which means you take in training, information, experience, and then it conflates into your own creation.
Right.
And every practitioner is supposed to do that and not just try to duplicate what they learned in school, because in my experience, that doesn't work.
Right. When you look at these deep traditional medicine systems, they're essentially pointing everything back to you as the practitioner, saying like, hey, you can't really do medicine unless you're walking an inner path, a spiritual path, a path of personal, psychological, spiritual development, right? And so, I kind of, again, by fortune, by grace, by spirit, ended up bumping into a teacher a couple of years after graduation, whose name's Juan Ruiz Nalpari, and he created a system called Numa, inspired by really, the synthesis of many great traditions that he studied over the course of his lifetime. And he was, he's Peruvian. He originally was connected to those shamanic traditions, but also, rooted in some of the early Christian mysticism. Has extensively studied with the Tibetan Buddhists, has spent time in India with the Hinduism, has just brought together this body of work that kind of the fruit of that work, or one of the primary fruits of that work, is a system called Numa breathwork. And the intention of that breathwork is really what differentiates it from any other system that I've experienced. And it's connected to the spirit. It's connected to essentially the purpose that we're here is to connect with our spirit, right? And so the purpose of that experience and the intention for it is literally to go in and connect to your spirit, so that you as an individual have a direct connection, you have a direct contact, right? Which was kind of the original meaning of gnosis, right? Direct revelation. And so, it was like that system really kind of brought everything I had ever done into a coherent model. And, this kind of missing piece, or the piece that was kind of hidden in everything else that I had done, but couldn't quite find or bring into a way of practice, came through that. And so, again, that in that system, there is a central importance on this mystical experience, right? That we need a mystical, direct connection to the divine, to that nous atom or spirit atom seed, in order to really evolve and heal and to kind of revolutionize ourselves as human beings, to become self-realized. We need that mystical experience, right? And so many of our systems and traditions, all of them really point towards that, but it's also kind of hidden, right? Like in alchemy, like you have to have the keys to be able to understand what the alchemists were talking about.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just, it sounds like a material, like a, you know.
And as a doctor, practitioner, I really take seriously that old adage, physician, heal thyself.
Yes.
And I make no bones about it. Every patient that I ever saw, it was, you know, hopefully serving them, but also about me.
It's amazing how that works.
Also, you know, you teach what you need to learn the most. So what you're describing from a practitioner standpoint gives you that larger context. So say,
Yes.
like yourself, you're trained in different hands-on skills, including acupuncture. Now that acupuncture has a larger context to work from,
Yes.
and you can channel those larger informational fields or
Yes.
energy, whatever you prefer to call it, through that more precise form of hands-on technique. But unless those procedures have found a source to draw from,
Yeah,
they're very limited.
that's right.
A lot of spiritual practices, especially ones that kind of border New Agey sort of things, I see the same shortcomings because you're seeking spirit, but you fail to realize that there's an electronic body just a few feet over your head that you can talk to, visualize, and incorporate into. It's like knowing that to run an appliance, you need to know where the wall socket is. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to me how logical that is, but that source that projects or animates our physical form every single moment, just so we can have this conversation, just to have an idea,
Right.
just to draw the next breath, is there all the time. But it seems like all religions and science and medicine seems to purposely forget about that or try to get us to look elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think you kind of named it. It's like there's a forgetting there, and there's also, you know, there's a story that we've all bought into, that we're victims in some way, instead of really recognizing that that connection, right, or that we need someone else. You know, even as a physician, I think this is a slippery slope, because where our ego can get involved is thinking we did something, right? I healed you. I came, I gave you that treatment and I fixed you, right? And that's where I think a lot of medicine lands nowadays, is like, I can fix you. I can help you fix that problem.
Yeah.
And in my experience, you have to fix that problem. I can help you to get to the place where you can find the cure for that problem, but the medicine comes from in here, right? And like you said, it comes from up here. It comes from, you know, at least metaphorically, comes from that celestial realm. And so, for me, the breathwork was a key piece, because it just gave me a way to, you know, connect to that mystical type of experience, and to help others to connect to that inner source of wisdom, and to have a framework for that type of experience. Because I also think nowadays what we see is just, you know, this kind of gold rush of the psychedelic movement, and people everywhere having psychedelic experiences that aren't necessarily the same as mystical experiences.
Yeah.
It's not automatic, right?
No.
And
it it definitely helps you change channels, but you have to be careful what channel you're
which
tuned
channel,
into.
right? It's like,
and just because you're getting information from
another realm,
it doesn't necessarily,
exactly.
There's some danger opening up those windows.
Absolutely. So you need a map, you need a framework, you need a training in order to be able to make those type of experiences actually productive and useful for your personal growth and to move you towards a process of self-realization.
Now, your process that you're describing and from the teacher that you're mentioning, they also acknowledge masters, ascended masters?
Absolutely. It's interesting.
So what does that mean to you or to them?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Pneuma really is a body of wisdom that has been largely like a revealed body of knowledge, right? It's rooted in texts that you can read. It's rooted in sacred traditions, but a lot of the decoding of that information has been revealed partly through the founder and through other individuals who have studied and use the same methodology to access that type of inner revelation, right? Gnosis or divine connection, where you receive direct information that then can be validated by others, right? And is validated by the traditions themselves, right? And by the results of those practices.
So the ascended masters, so-called, are they individuals that embodied and then reached a certain state of realization? What does that look like? What does that even mean?
That's a good way of thinking about it. So, when we look at all the mythology that we have from many different cultures, we often in our kind of, I think our modern arrogance think like, oh, those are myths, right? Those are just characters in the past. They're, unfortunately nowadays Disney cartoons, like guys like Hercules, right? And when you look at the 12
basis and
12 labors of Hercules, that was an inner process that he went to in order to reach a state of what the Greeks called being a demigod, right? Being kind of half god, half man, being an embodied divinity. And that was a literal, but also an internal process that he went through. And then similarly, we talk about the process that Buddha went through to reach Buddhahood was an internal process. You can look through all the mythology and see similar themes. So there's a lot of reference to that process and recognition that the masters and the kind of fully realized beings, the human beings who have reached a fully realized state continue to exist, right? So they reach a certain level where the physical is no longer a limitation, and they can continue to work with humanity for the benefit of all beings. And some of them do that more than others. And some of them do that for a phase, and then they move on to other projects because there's a big universe out there. But that there's also a kind of a council or a collective of ascended masters and, that are here to work with humanity in this time. And that is, in Pneuma, that's represented by the archetype of the golden eagle.
And historically, of course, Western religions are based on what we'll loosely call Christianity, which was a Roman terminology, not anything created by Jesus.
Right.
And Jesus made many statements, greater works ye shall do, something like that. And when he said, I am, he was not saying I versus his person, related to his personality, but I am related to that electronic body. I am has a very specific resonance, and when you say it announces to the universe that the Godhead is speaking at your coordinate in the universe. That's why in Eastern cultures they chanted Om, which was I am is the English translation of Om. So when you understand that you are acknowledging your Godhood in this point in consciousness, then that becomes a very powerful thing. I have a very argumentative mind.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
For me anyway, I need to reconcile what another part of me knows intuitively, but my mind wants to argue against it. So I've adapted studies into waveform physics that I believe are the missing link between Western physics and spiritualism. And Walter Russell, who's been a strong influence in my life, not saying that he knew everything, but definitely was able to demonstrate some very basic truths. So all of life, as we were speaking before, is a product of resonance created by an electrical event, polarization, and that's how we get this whole appearance world. So everything also in that manifestation of those polarities is a toroidal field. Now, this has become mainstream.
Right.
It's not in the area of mysticism anymore. A toroidal field is, you could think of it as two cones superimposed over each other. One cone is compressing information from source in a certain centripetal direction into a pinpoint of stratified increasing compression. And not to get technical here, but if you just get the concept, and that is what creates the next frame in the movie that we think is you and I sitting here and everything else around us. Simultaneously, that compression is going up in a different centrifugal direction into a widening where those information is going back to be renewed by source for the next cycle of compression, which is actually happening simultaneously. So one, the compression, we could think of as revolution, and the radiation, the dispersion, giving back to source, I am the resurrection and the life, which is what that statement actually meant. Now you're able to not only renew the experience every moment, but when one half of the cycle predominates, then we either get less grounded here and now, or we get too compressed here and now.
Right.
And we live in a culture that is teaching, through scientism, we could call it, that everything is a linear, progressive physicality, and that's all. Then you're emphasizing that revolution part. And if you spin a top, and the top just runs out of the rotation, which keeps it focused here, then two things happen. It's going to lose its ability to be here, and then it's going to start to wobble.
Right.
And in a toroidal field, when that happens, that compression cycle loses the mana to stay compressed, which leads to what we think of as so-called death. And then that wobble creates, if you can imagine these two forces doing that, there's an equator, and then things kind of oblate at the equator when the top starts doing this instead of this. And that creates an oblation. On an EKG, that eventually is recognized as flatlining. This is all electrical. So everything in existence is a toroidal field. The planet, the whatever's above our heads, every mineral in the ground is a living toroid. We are no exception. So what I'm trying to get around to, probably not doing a good job.
I love it. No, you're like,
is that
going off in my mind.
When our consciousness then is able to incorporate both states of being at the same time, I am the resurrection and the life, then we maintain a perfect balance of rotation, maintaining our physicality while at the same time being in this world but not of it, because we realize the source. And eventually that builds up a momentum that we recognize. You've been a martial artist. We recognize that as building up momentum through energy conversation, not conservation, not leaking it out. And that momentum eventually allows an elevation so that the electronic body and what we think of as the physical form are absorbed into one, which is what Jesus was trying to not just talk about, but actually did it and left a living example for all time in the ethers for all of us to follow. And there are, I am told, tens of thousands of ascended masters who have achieved that process. There is a place up in the hills in China where they call it the Valley of the Ancients, where there's all these people that reached that state, you know, from the martial arts community and so forth, and they lived hundreds and hundreds of years building up that momentum because their body no longer aged, because they understood what we're talking about and eventually achieved their ascension. However, we have been giving a dispensation in this time because we're living in an era where this is to be realized on more of a mass scale, and you don't have to preserve your body for hundreds of years. And we have the opportunity to do this in a single lifetime.
Which is rare.
So that's my concept of what the ascension is. And it's very practical, it's very scientific, and it's very doable, and it can be demonstrated by anybody that's willing to put in the elbow grease.
I think that's important. I mean, you said so many things there that like sparked for me. One, just this simplification of everything is like the idea or the concept of human in Chinese medicine as between heaven and earth. Right? So that we stand as a kind of a bridge between heaven and earth, those centrifugal and centripetal energies, and that also, I think, is represented in the Seal of Solomon, right? That those two pyramids coming together, the yin and yang, and at the moment that we die or oblate, as you were describing, the separation of yin and yang can happen. And I mean, one of the things that for me has been crucial in the work I was describing with Numa is that there's a real emphasis, which I think is missing, and like you said, in many of the kind of new age spiritual circles, on what Numa calls psychoethics or virtues, and recognizing that it's actually the development of our virtues as human beings that allows us to move forward in that ascension process, that it's not mechanical, it's not automatic. You can't just do yoga, you can't just fire the kundalini up the spine without actually, like you called it, the elbow grease of like, you have to get in there and you have to heal this vehicle, which is really about figuring out how to be able to express virtues in your life and get everything out of the way that keeps you from being able to do that, which is ultimately the illusion, right? Why don't we shine fully all the time? Why can't we hang out in those celestial realms? Because we don't have the vehicles. We haven't developed which essentially equate to the virtues, right? And so we have to be able to go in and find the origin of what keeps us attached here, what has kind of lowered our vibrational frequency. And, in Numa, that is sort of understood as the ego, which, there's a lot of different concepts of what that means, but in Numa, that is the origin of what keeps us stuck in this realm and attached and in conflict and hypnotized by the illusion and in this illusion of suffering, or that we're victims of our disease or our past or someone else's actions or, karma, right? And that we're
karma,
ultimately
original sin is
the
all
agents,
the same thing,
right? And that we're here with a very perfectly designed curriculum for how to get to that highest potential state, right? It's ultimately, and that's the kind of the bridge I'm seeing, for myself and my practice going forward, and kind of integrating the work that I've done with Numa into the medicine side is like the kind of the reconciliation of the psychological process that we have to live with the medical, what we can, you know, usually think of as the medical process in the sense of like, I'm helping you to heal, but you're having to do the work, right? You're the one who really has to do the work inside.
So when you're working with a client, do you use specific breathing techniques while you're doing this?
Yeah, the Pneuma breathwork is, you know, and Pneuma is the Greek for spirit and breath. So it's, the technique itself is very simple. It's really about inhaling and exhaling light. So your focus gets really sharp on the luminous element in the oxygen, right? The pranic or perhaps etheric, right, element that is present in the physical oxygen, but it's subtle. And although, yes, we're always breathing spirit, when we focus our attention on it, it expands and it grows. And so now we're not just breathing physical oxygen and kind of hyper oxygenating, we're actually saturating ourselves with the consciousness that is in the air, and coupled with the intention to really go to spirit and to allow spirit to be what guides the experience. And then with a map for what happens in that other reality, because when you do that, your consciousness amplifies. You start to see what you didn't see in this ordinary state. You start to have access to visually or intuitively recognize the energetic elements of where energy is stuck in your body, or where emotions are stuck in your astral, or, you know, the presence of love, or the ascended masters, or the angels, or the Buddhas in your world, right? How they're working to help you, or the dynamics of a relationship where you have tension that, you know, you're just thinking, that guy's such a jerk, and instead really you're missing the bigger picture. And all that is kind of begins to be unveiled in a very didactic way, not in a kind of a shotgun way, or in a way that is chaotic, which I think happens in a lot of psychedelic and even many breathwork experiences, to the point where it can be really disorienting and fragmenting for people, but in an orderly way, because spirit is saying, okay, I know you want to get over here, but first you have to go over here, and then you have to go over here, and then you have to go over here, and then we'll get there, right? And so that, you know, the technique itself is very simple. The framework or the methodology around it, and having those maps is essential for those experiences. And then, you know, for me, what my role I see is in a way just as a facilitator of, you know, that experience, but then the kind of the healing process that goes along with that, which is oftentimes very physical, right? Because all of that is
absolutely
has landed, is crystallized in our physical body. And I love the conversations that you know, your perspective in bioterrain medicine for me has really become a kind of a lens, or a way of describing what I do. I think Eastern medicine does an amazing job at framing that we're not just talking about an ailment or a diagnosis or a pathology. We're talking about a person. Talking about a being in whom there is some, you know, there's some blockage of energy based on many levels of things, right? We've talked about the multi-layers. And
emotions are what we are.
Right.
We think we're these rational, intellectual beings, but we're emotional beings.
Right.
And if you understand, going back to the alchemical perspective, they metaphorically use different elements to designate the stratification that creates precipitation from consciousness all the way to this stuff we see on the ground here. And the water element, you know, 3 rungs down, is what conveyed the informational fields into the physical. And emotions are the water element. Emotions create the velocity for those thought bubbles to actually take form and function. And in anthroposophical medicine, it's very well understood how that water element rung of the etheric ladder is what we call the astral plane. You know, it's just a mirror of those etheric levels of our body. It's exactly what they're talking about. And that astral plane is accessed through the cerebral spinal fluid. So your senses, particular hearing, but all of them, have connections through a choroid process that conveys all the information that's carried through the blood and the lymph as it travels through every organ, every tissue of our body, and picks up the resonance of where we're at emotionally and otherwise.
Right.
That then is interfaced with the cerebral spinal fluid at these choroidal plexus, and the cerebral spinal fluid then, of course, ultimately goes up to that cavern, the third, ventricle in the brain. That is a reservoir that creates a spark between the pineal and the pituitary gland, which then conveys all of that information to that in our entire etheric anatomy, especially to the astral. So when we do what you're talking about to bring purification into those emotional states or transmute them, however you want to think about it, then in that next moment, that is, instead of the same toxic emotions in those informational fields being conveyed to the astral, you have this new, more elevated, less toxic state of being. And the astral body is, in fact, what creates the physicality of our body every single moment.
Moment to moment.
So you got to change the way you feel is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of where I was going with that. Just, listening to you talk about bioterrain medicine. And for me, like I said, so much of the work I do with medicine is in that emotional, psychological space, and recognizing that, okay, we're not talking about like a germ that you got exposed to. We're talking about an energetic field that you live in based on what's happening. Like the external is a mirror of what's happening internally. And if you want to change your health, you have to change what's going on inside. And if you want to do that, you have to know what's going on inside, which is largely, we're largely ignorant of that, no matter how much we think we know up here. None of that education shows you what's going on in here. And so I love that.
So what's next for us all? A lot of people are always saying, hey, you need to get out and teach. And a lot of the things that you talk about aren't taught anymore. I talk to young people graduate from naturopathy or even regular medical school. And and they're saying, well, you got to teach because there's not many folks out there coming from that generation of understanding. And my response is, well, it's over. Rather than trying to re-educate based on the past or think that Steiner had all the answers or Walter Russell or anybody, it's, I think, incumbent upon us to move the ball downfield. And so rather than trying to train a new generation in what I learned that was good for my experience, maybe it's all moving into the place where we don't need doctors at all.
Interesting.
So that's what I believe is happening now. So we've got a lot of big events going on in the world today.
We sure do.
And I don't think we have time to do all the do all the things or believe that we're going to beat it by taking peptides or NAD or, that's all good stuff because it helps support the body, but, longevity medicine also means that you're fighting aging.
Well,
so now you're back in that polarity again,
right?
Yeah.
Is it evolving you in terms of is it bringing you closer to self-realization or is it just preserving the physical?
Yeah.
Those are two different things.
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
We're not talking about, like you said, the immortals that lived on the mountains in ancient China.
They didn't do it through peptides.
It wasn't a peptide. It wasn't a biohack.
Or shooting up some moral.
It was like an internal process, right? They came to manifest the virtues, to be living expressions of the eternal virtues.
Yeah.
Right? If you become the eternal virtues, you live eternally.
Yeah. And I see, you and I were talking earlier, we look at the chemtrails in the sky, we look at food poisoning, we look at what the pharma companies are doing and how millions of people are literally dying right now from certain things that were done a couple years ago. And we have 5G on the horizon, which is a militarized microcurrent that's actually a laser once it reaches that state of 6G versus 5G. 5G was horrible because they're very small micronage, vertical-oriented toxic waveforms. And now we've got the same, only in a laser focus on the way. So a lot of us, talk about these things and are wringing our hands, and I get a little pissed off sometimes. Who are the, what's, come on.
Well, you kind of know the storyline, and I think, the early Christians, the ancient Gnostics said, they were just kind of pragmatic about it. They said, okay, well, this is beautiful. We can enjoy it, but it's a prison. Let's be real. And the only way out is to become the light. There's only one way out. So how do we do that? It's an inner job. We need a methodology. We need a process. And I think you're right in that sense of, like, we need a generation of people who are willing to work internally and willing to kind of follow the steps that have been laid out for us by the masters. Jesus, the Christ, left us a clear map, right? But how many people really want to follow in his footsteps?
It's a commitment. You need to eat, breathe, and sleep. A focus on your source, and the mind really likes to go elsewhere.
The mind does not want to do the will of the heart, right? And I love Chinese medicine too. The word for Shen or spirit is heart mind. Right, and it's the unification of those systems, but really this one is subservient to this one. Right, the spirit lives here. It's located here. The mind is like a vehicle for the spirit to do the will of the greater Shen or the greater spirit.
Saint Germain says that, and this is a very old school that I've been, we were talking about this earlier, I've been involved with for about 40 years, and got to mingle with the old timers who are walking and talking, and the old original Shasta was Saint Germain. So, but they have a salutation amongst ascended masters, this a gesture with their hands, which is heart and mind as one. And that is, in fact, the ascension. And that's exactly that toroid that is now not operating just on one side predominantly.
Right.
And so it's the unification of the heart and the mind. And there's great visualizations where the heart, and this is where martial arts was really valuable to me, because you learn how to laser focus your attention on different points of your body, but the central sun of our body, the heart, when you just learn to keep your attention there, there's a very expanded physical sensation you get from that. And then there's a sevenfold flame in your forehead, and there's a way to get that same thing up there and then unify them as one. So it's a very practical, physical thing. It's not thinking about a metaphysical concept. It's no different than being in a ring fighting with somebody where you're back on your heels and you're not going to get out of it in any way other than regaining your calm,
back in your center,
getting your peripherals working, and being loose tight all at the same time. And that's what the heart and mind does. You are in the absence of fear, and you are bringing our conversation back to square one. You're in the state of prenatal.
Right.
So what's the future look for you here?
Well, I'm neighbor up here in Ojai, just on the other side of these hills.
Beautiful place.
My wife and I have a little wellness center there that's kind of an offspring of the place where we met, Alchemy Arts Center. It's called Alquimia, which is the Spanish for alchemy. And we spend a lot of time teaching and training with Pneuma Institute, which has its international headquarters in Shasta, which is, I know you have roots there. And the masters in this time are, they're still working in that space and have their kind of nest.
Well, it's an inner retreat there. Yeah.
And so
they're not going away.
We spend a lot of time up there, and and we're just trusting that the flow is going to unfold. Hopefully I'm going to be spending more time with you. And
so when you're in Shasta, hop over on the 5, which is right there. Head down 199 from Grants Pass, and 2 hours from Grants Pass. I guess Shasta's about, an hour south of Grants Pass?
Yep.
And then we're 2 hours into the river country there.
Yeah.
So you got to come see us.
Yeah, I got to come visit.
Yeah, awesome.
Definitely.
So tell the folks, do you have any websites or anything out there?
We do have a website.
And tell us, you've got some good products out there too.
Yeah. I'll give you like 3 different websites. So our place in Ojai is called Alquimia, ALQUIMIA.life. And so that's where I work medical practice. I work with people locally and online. And then my product line is called Essential Medicina. It was a little bit of an offspring from your product line, because I convinced your son to let me get into his production room a couple of times. And I was like, oh, wow, I really want to create a product. It looks like you've already sourced all the ingredients that, and so I just took what you were already using and formulated based on what I was needing in my practice, which were mostly a couple of ways to help people to deal with, what we used to call for a while adrenal fatigue, but really just like sympathetic overdrive, and nervous system overstimulation. So created a really nice adrenal formula that you can make a latte out of it. Oh, I was like, how do I trick people into drinking Chinese herbs?
Yeah.
We've got to put them in a latte because everyone drinks a latte every day. And then there's a brain formula in there that's nice. And I love that you use the humic fulvics, because I always use Shilajit in the formula to kind of drive and carry it deeper. And
so what's the web address again of that?
That's Essential Medicina, medicina.com.
Okay, and I'm going to put all this information in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
On YouTube and Rumble.
Thank you.
And so there's another one. Did we do all 3?
Those 2, and then if you're interested in the work with the breath work, it's
I think a lot of people would be interested.
So PNEUMA Institute.org. And that's the international organization. They're headquartered in Mount Shasta, but there actually are Pneumas all over the world. Little satellite, points of light that you can dip into and find a place to do breath work, place to connect. Amazing. And there are teachings online if you're interested in that kind of inner methodology for really how to transform ourselves. It's an alchemical process, like you always refer to. And the teachings are all there. It's like we just need the clues for how to make them our own and how to navigate that, this inner reality and that kind of greater reality that we're part of. Yeah.
Well, Eric, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Just on a personal level, just great reconnecting.
Absolutely.
And I know our audience has gotten a lot of value from the wisdom that you shared, through your experience. So. And thank you for meeting up. And I'm going to go visit you in Ojai too.
I would love that. Yeah, likewise. Thank you for the invitation. I feel just honored and privileged to get to have a personal conversation with you. I'm always listening to your podcast and taking every note I can. So
you're the one, huh? So, and to our audience, thank you. Happy holidays. I'll have this premiering probably after the holidays, but happy holidays anyway. Love you all. Take care.